Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody here this morning to the June 4th, 2024 AM Board of Supervisors meeting. Before we start the meeting, we'd like to have our invocation, and we would ask that everybody please stand and remain standing as we welcome Pastor Craig Muffley from Culpeper United Methodist Church, who's going to lead us in the invocation.
Thank you, Chairman Bates, and I'd like to thank your Deputy Clerk, Kim Ellis, for the invitation to be with you here today. Let us pray. Gracious God of us all, we thank you for your loving and steadfast presence with us this morning. May the thoughts and speech and our conversations of everyone gathered here this day be inspired by you, O Lord. Lord, we pray that you inspire our board members this day and always to make decisions that are not only for the greater good of the people of this great county we call home, but ones that are also acceptable in your sight, O God. Grant them wisdom in times of uncertainty and clarity in times of confusion. Remind them to seek your counsel and wisdom. Guide them and strengthen them as a group. Help them to appreciate one another's gifts and strengths and to be gracious toward one another in instances where opinions differ strongly or when mistakes are made. Keep their eyes fixed on you, O God, and their hearts filled with a desire to do your will. And for all of us gathered together this day, Lord, I pray that you would fill each of our hearts with your holy, loving presence. Grant us patience. Help us to be respectful of one another and of each person's input, and to be accepting of the decisions made by this body this day. We place all these prayer requests before you, Heavenly Father, knowing that you are a God who hears and responds to our prayers with great wisdom and grace that only you possess. I offer this prayer in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
At this time, I'd like to call to order the June 4th, 2024 AM Board of Supervisors meeting, and I ask that Supervisor Underwood please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business this morning will be the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to item 2.02, our consent agenda, and I will ask our County Administrator, John Eggerson, to introduce these items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. We have several items on the consent agenda this morning. Under item A, the board will consider approval of the minutes from the May 7, 2024 AM and PM meetings. Under item B, the board will consider acceptance of 6 donations and a budget amendment in the total amount of $4,600 for the Parks and Recreation Department. The funds are for the Culpeper Palooza Music Festival. Under item C, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and a budget amendment in the amount of $1,000 for the Sheriff's Office. The donation is for the cadet program. Under item D, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and appropriation of the funds in the amount of $44,836 for the library. The funds are from the Library Foundation and are for service contracts and databases, as well as for the patio shade sale project. And under item E, the board will consider approval of a budget amendment for the Culpeper County Public Schools in the amount of $1,985,532. The funds are FY23 Commonwealth of Virginia one-time school construction funds, which are now ready for use on various school projects.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments for John pertaining to the consent agenda or a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Moving on to Item 3.0, our general county business. We would ask for Mark Nesbitt for VDOT Warrington residency to give us an update on the quarterly report.
Good morning, Chairman Bates and board members. I appreciate y'all letting me be here today. With me today, I have Roy Tate, my assistant resident administrator, and also an engineering intern for the summer, Adam Dawson, who is a local Culpeper resident and a rising senior at George Mason. And he's going to be working, hopefully when he graduates, he'll be working for me at Warrington Residency. So we'll treat him right. It has been a very productive last few months. Our maintenance crews have been involved in mowing and brush removal, gravel road maintenance, pavement and drainage repairs, and weather response activities, incident, traffic accidents. They've been really busy. We recently took over the eastern portion of Culpeper County from Louisa Maintenance, which there's a history there, but it just became obvious it's time to make a change over time. And historically, the Louisa residency out of the Roseville area headquarters has maintained the lower area of or eastern portion of Culpeper County. Felt like because I pretty much represent Culpeper County, and I'm the liaison for the board for transportation, that it made sense for all that to be in Warrington Residency. So we finally bit the bullet, and it's about 350 lane miles of road, or centerline miles of road. And so we're in the process now of transferring resources, manpower and equipment resources to our West Culpeper area headquarters, and we'll, effective July 1, we'll be responsible for maintaining all those roads in that area. So any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. But we're also working on our rural rustic construction program this season. We're mainly focusing on Old Stillhouse Road this year. We've got 3 sections of Old Stillhouse Road, approximately 3.5 miles of gravel road that we're going to be hard surfacing towards the end of the summer. And that will almost close out your revenue sharing program. I believe that leaves Hazelland Road, if depending on the amount of time we have, we may be able to get that one in too, but that most likely will slip into next year. And that'll complete the revenue sharing rural rustic program that the county has been involved in last several years. And our paving program is well underway this year. We're doing over 22 miles of plant mix and 9.5 miles of surface treatment. So that is underway, and that will continue on through the summer. We just recently completed adding paved shoulders to Route 229. That's almost 13 miles of road now has paved shoulders. Those were using HSIP funds. So I think that will provide a huge benefit to that section of road for safety reasons. We're also we also did what we call a friction course on Eggsburnville Road, a section of that in a curvy section that had a lot of crashes, run off the road type crashes. So the friction course, which is basically a surface treatment, will help that prevent those types of accidents from occurring. We also have some projects coming up this summer where we're going to do some ramp improvements at the Route 3 and 29 interchange. The southbound 29 ramp on the Route 3 coming into Culpeper, we're going to extend that turn lane about 500 feet, and we're going to improve the shoulder, add a paved shoulder on that ramp. We always have a maintenance problem there. I'm sure all of y'all have been on that ramp. And we're also going to do some similar type improvements on the 15 and Route 29 and 15 interchange. The next interchange over, we're going to do some similar improvements where we're having some shoulder maintenance problems, widening those paved shoulders. As far as smart scale projects, the roundabout at McDevitt Street and Route 3 is still on track for advertisement later this year. I believe we're still looking at an October of '24 construction advertisement, which means next year's time it'll be under construction. They're finalizing utility relocations, and so we'll be ready to go when this project is advertised and we get a contractor. And we have two projects that are, we're in design right now from that were previously funded from Smart Scale, the Route 3, Carrico Mills intersection improvements, and the roundabout at 229 and 621. So those are still moving forward and still a few years out, but they're still on schedule. And also the town of Culpeper has several projects that are funded. One is a roundabout at the Route 3, 15 and 522 intersection there south of town, and also sidewalk projects on Orange Road and Old Brandy Road. And also recently, we found that the two projects that the county submitted for revenue sharing projects received funding. They weren't fully funded, but they received funding from revenue sharing, and hopefully we'll be able to add on to that in subsequent years so that you can get those projects fully funded at some point. Really don't know exactly how long that will take, but it's a competitive process, and every year or every other year the funding is available, and certainly we'll work with the county and try to move those projects forward as quickly as we can. Really only have right now one traffic engineering review underway. We're looking at the speed limit on Route 15 near the Carver Center. I know the county has plans to make some improvements there, and we've been asked to look at the speed limit there to help with safety concerns along that area of Route 15, so we are in the process of doing that. We still have a bridge construction project that's scheduled for next year on Hazel River Road. It's a secondary road bridge project, and that will be next summer. As far as there was some legislation that came through this past legislative season that will impact what we do. One is the use of photo speed monitoring devices in certain locations and on our state highways. Already it is legal or approved to use them in school zones and work zones, but the additional legislation will allow for their use in other locations. Like any legislation, there's a policy guidance that has to be created by the agency, so we're in the process of doing that. I don't have all the details of what that's going to finally look like, but that is in the works. Also, legislation to allow use of unpaved road funds to improve unpaved roads without hard surfacing them. So that is also in the works, and I'm not sure exactly what that is going to end up looking like from a policy guidance perspective, but that is in the works. And finally, legislation that will allow localities to lower speed limits to 15 miles an hour on roads now that are currently 25 in a business or residential district, that will allow the locality to lower the speed limit to 15. Again, the policy guidance has not been finalized yet, so I'm not exactly sure how that will be implemented, but that has been have passed both bodies of the legislature. And so that's about all I had. I mentioned the taking over the eastern port of Culpeper County, so that'll be effective July 1. So we'll look forward to taking care of that additional area. It's about 350 more miles of road. So anyway, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions or comments for Mark?
Yes, Mark, with regards to the improvements at Route 29 and 15,
Yes.
and I'm talking about going south on 29, is that going to include at the top of the exit ramp, a right and a left-hand turn lane up there?
I'm pretty sure that that intersection, we're basically just going to improve the shoulder enough so we don't have that drop off at the edge of the pavement. We're not adding any turn lanes or anything as part of that.
All right, we might, I guess, consider that, especially in light of the new homes being built there at Laurel Avenue. And so I think we'll have a terrific increase in traffic coming off of that exit in the very near future.
Well, we'll just have to watch that. Typically, when new development comes along and they generate the need for those types of improvements, they're typically try to get them to pay for it. And apparently, I don't have the traffic study in front of me, but either it did not generate, or the traffic study did not generate the need for that turn lane, or it did, and it just hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
I can't speak to that right now, but I can certainly look into it and get back in touch with you on that.
Yeah, that'd be terrific. I mean, in the afternoons now, right, starting at 4 or 5 o'clock, that ramp gets backed up pretty badly. And so, again, I think with all those homes being built and people moving in there, that's going to increase that traffic.
I'll be
by
glad
quite
to
a
find
bit.
out what the plan is for that.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Okay.
I did want to mention one thing. We've had some complaints about shoulder washout on Carico Mill near the Warrenton Training Center. Have you guys been able to take a look at?
We are, that is one area that we want to try to come up with a fix for that. We haven't finalized that yet, but we are looking at it. I have the same concerns.
Mark, you mentioned in your report you're looking at some traffic studies on Route 15 at the Carver Center. The county's invested some significant money there. Carver Center is becoming a much busier place. We appreciate you looking at that. We are planning on we're having a project to improve the parking lot there, which will improve ingress and egress onto 15. We're going to work on the northern end of that. The southern end, the southern entrance is going to require a bit more work, which will have some utility impacts maybe. And if we could get the state to be part of that, or maybe undertake that southern entrance improvement, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think we received a plan for that, and we have been looking at that with county staff, and I don't know if we've finalized anything, but we are involved in that, and we'll do what we can to help.
That
move
would be
along.
good. It's becoming a busy place, and we need to make those improvements, and your help would be
We'll certainly
much
do
appreciated.
Yeah, we'll certainly do what we can to help with that.
Any other comments? I would just like to end on a high note. I'm going to relay gratitude and appreciation from my constituents when it comes to Settle School Road and the overlay from 522 to Dutch Hollow Road. I have gotten more emails and thanks for getting that done. The Settle School Road project has been like a 15-year ongoing deal, and the residents on that road are just tickled. I mean, they're really happy. Well, up until the point when the F1 hurricane came through, a tornado came through
Yeah.
and knocked the trees in that bottom and punched holes in our new tarred chip. So hopefully we can look at that and maybe get those patched up. But
Yeah.
the overlay from 522 over to Dutch Hollow is perfect.
Well,
Thank you so much for that.
appreciate that. It was good to
So,
hear that. I'll relay that on.
We appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to old business. Item 4.01, the board will consider adoption of the fiscal year 2025 appropriation resolution. And with this, I'll turn it over to the county administrator for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you're obviously well aware, last month's meeting, we adopted the budget and the tax rates and the capital improvements plan, but decided to hold off on the appropriation resolution. It was requested that I talk to the Chairman and do a little more investigation of what it might look like to do a half-year appropriation. We have done that. I've heard from several board members. But in any case, on board docs, we laid out a few reasons why the staff at least would prefer the annual appropriation. That's not to say that the semi-annual couldn't be done. It certainly could be done, and it's done in other places. And I did ask our finance director to prepare an appropriation resolution for both scenarios. But again, as a just primarily administrative issue, we were seeking the full year resolution.
Thank you, John. Questions or comments for John?
Looking at what staff has listed as the reasons to not do the two appropriations, I understand it, meaning they prepared an annual appropriation, and so if you were to budget in a way and appropriate in a way that you would do two a year, you would have to consider that there are contract expenses that need to be made once a year. So you would appropriate that in the first part, even though it covers the entire year. And you would do the same thing. You could put teacher contracts into that also. So we could do multiple appropriations and do so without having cash uncertainty for those needs that where we don't want to have cash uncertainty, but it would take a different way of looking at it. So I'm inclined to support the annual appropriation because of that, but I would also ask that staff, if possible, come up with a way to look at two appropriations in the future, because there are other issues where we do need to have control, especially when constitutional offices, for example, change, and you have a different officer. To be able to appropriate twice a year for that makes sense. So if we could prepare for that long term, that'd probably be good. I'll make a motion that we do the annual appropriation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to item 4.02, the board will discuss whether to further pursue zoning text amendments regarding residential uses in the commercial zoning districts. And again, I'll turn this over to John for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll kick this off, and Mr. McLaren may want to come up and be prepared to address this as well. But the board did refer a proposal to the Planning Commission for consideration, which would have required a conditional use permit for residential uses in the commercial zoning district. Currently, those uses are by right use. And the Planning Commission, after consideration and a public hearing, declined to move forward and recommended to the board that no action be taken on that particular issue. For that reason, rather than place it on tonight's agenda as a public hearing item for the board, we've placed it on this morning. And the board has its options wide open at this point. You can advise us to go ahead and advertise a public hearing at your next meeting in July. You can drop the matter, or you can refer it elsewhere for further study.
Thank you, John. It's the pleasure of the board. Questions?
What was the vote of the Planning Commission and what was their rationale?
I believe the vote was 6-2, but Sam would be able to elaborate more. Mr. Underwood.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Yeah, the vote was 6-2. I did put that on board docs. There was discussion. Actually, the Planning Commission looked at it for two separate months. The first month, we considered the conditional use permit route for residential uses in the commercial. Planning Commission as a whole reached a consensus that they did not like that recommendation from the Rules Committee and the board to research that. So then they went and had staff look back at some of the other options that we had presented to the Rules Committee, and those are all posted on board docs as well. Variations of a certain percentage of commercial, or a certain percentage of residential, in the commercial zoning districts, and then allowing some mixed use. And the Planning Commission did consider those the following month. The Planning Commission did not think those were needed or appropriate changes at this time either. And to answer the question, Supervisor Underwood, basically, they didn't think that it was necessary at this time to make any changes to the commercial zoning districts. One thing that you have to look at, and that's why I put that last statement up there, you know, when you're looking at 15-22286 there, they just didn't feel like there was a need that was going to serve the public necessity, convenience, which is spelled wrong now, I look at that, or general welfare, a good zoning practice for the Virginia Code. So they just didn't feel like there was a need at this time. We did go over the parcels that were zoned commercial today. As you recall, there's 3 different zoning districts today, and all that was known. We did have a public hearing. We had very limited participation in that public hearing, but there was some that was not favorable for the change. So that's the background that I have to provide based on what the Planning Commission has done.
Thank you, Sam. Any other questions or comments for Sam?
So, I mean, I'm not sure if this is directed at Sam, but the reason why we brought this up to begin with was the fact that when we rezone something commercial, we're expecting commercial services, a net revenue positive, and this allows for a completely opposite outcome of residential houses that typically are a net revenue negative. So the concern was that in the future, if people decide, oh, well, this is a commercial area, I'm going to zone it commercial services, they sell it, and then all of a sudden you have a 600-house apartment complex, you've now lost your ability to plan on a land use and on a taxation purpose. So maybe we don't have that problem now, but we're looking at the future. The comprehensive plan is a 20-year document. We need to make sure that we're setting ourselves up with all of the development and all the pressure that's coming from Northern Virginia, Charlottesville, and Fredericksburg. We are going to be in constant desire of development, and residential is usually the height of that. So to protect ourselves, we need to make sure that our commercial services will allow us for that net revenue positive and ensure that we have the ability to plan our growth, to plan our tax rates, to plan ahead. And that's why I don't feel that commercial services should allow a 100% standalone residential development. There has to be some kind of commercial involved.
Sam, when's the last time this board approved a commercial services rezoning where there was not a proffer some way addressing residential?
Last time we looked at, I don't know, standing here, Supervisor Underwood, to answer that question directly.
Well, would staff, could you imagine a case where a large commercial services rezoning would come forward where staff would not recommend some kind of site plan or understanding of what was going to occur?
Yeah, generally today, we would expect some type of concept plan, you know, to be submitted with that rezoning so that or a proffer statement, or both, that suggests, you know, what we're looking at.
So
there are some that are proffered today that are in this scenario that where the residential isn't allowed, and those are still, there are some parcels that are open, you know.
right, but if we're concerned about the future, we have the ability to consider that, don't we?
Yes, you do. The board does, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's kind of a misnomer to have commercial have a full ability to do a lot of residential within it, because there's a way there to end around. If somebody came in here with an A1 parcel and want to rezone it commercial, the board would probably see no problem with that, because you're looking at a positive tax revenue. You're going to have something there that's going to provide services and sell goods. But if they all of a sudden decide, well, we don't want to do commercial, we can do those houses, flip it, do it real quick, then unless they proffer it out on a rezoning request, then it stays in there. So the way we've got it set up right now is that I can come in here for a commercial rezoning for my property, and I've ended around the getting a residential rezoning. So I think it would behoove the board to think strongly about cutting that back to 25% or something like that, instead of it all be there available for that use, because it's not a positive revenue with the houses. And I think a prime example is, I didn't support the rezoning. I fought it harder than I've ever fought anything of the Clevenger Corner area. But the board tied them, or they tied themselves, to only so many houses before they had commercial. Once they reach a certain stage, they're gonna stop till the commercial gets put into place. I mean, so it doesn't make sense to me to leave it as it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Another point to bring up Clevenger's Corner, that's a planned use development. We've now made planned use development. We've reduced the acreage requirements. We're working through that to allow for more of that mixed use development. So why would we have two zoning designations that provide the same outcome? I'm very trying to wrap my head around the fact that, you know, we can build houses in agriculture, we can build houses in residential, we can build houses in commercial. I'm not sure what year it was we removed housing from industrial, but at some point we need to cultivate and be able to dictate that commercial services are commercial services. And to have multiple different ways to skin the cat in this case, I think just makes our zoning overall more confusing. Which one's better? Which one do I get this? Which one do I get that? This allows us to better streamline this to be commercial services is commercial services. And I believe that all of our surrounding counties and stuff don't allow residential and commercial services zoning. Is that correct?
Yeah, that actually is correct. Most localities don't allow, by right anyway, residential in their commercial. There are some that do. There are some that are Culpeper, but the surrounding ones are a little more restrictive. So.
You know, these comments are spot on, in my opinion. And when you look at what's took place with industrial, and I think that was in 2008 or 2009, that the residential aspect was taken completely out of industrial. And for lack of a better term, circumnavigating. In other words, we're anticipating on a planning aspect that this is going to be a commercial development. And then the next thing we know, it is all high-density residential. That doesn't help your office moving forward. And to Supervisor Underwood's question, it doesn't have to be, I mean, if it's CS right now, they can automatically do R4, is that right?
R3.
R3,
uses,
R3.
But yeah, they could if there aren't proffers that proffer it out. And there are some that are zone CS that could enjoy that use potentially.
Well, short of doing a complete, you know, doing away with the houses altogether, I think a good compromise is the 25%. And that, you know, I think that's a, you know, kind of a meeting in the middle type. And it gives you more of an idea of what to expect once this development is done, so.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to state that my concern is the lack of affordable housing in our county. I believe that the passage of these amendments would reduce greatly the flexibility for us to have varied and affordable housing. The median home prices have increased 11% from 2023 to 2024, and the median home price in Culpeper is now $470,000. So my concern is that, again, passage of these amendments further restricts the ability for us to have more affordable housing, and I think we desperately need that right now.
Mr. Chairman, I have only got history going back about 25 years relative to commercial services rezonings. I am unaware of the board passing a single one that would allow by right residential. They just haven't. Now, the Planning Commission is aware of that. They're aware that we've not created, the only problems we've created is when we try to solve other problems. So an example of that would be January of 2011, when we consolidated commercial districts. At that time, I was very concerned about 50 acres up in Brandy Station, where I said we should not make it commercial services because we would lose the proffers, and then we would have challenges. We should leave it alone, or if we don't leave it alone, we should zone it light industrial, because we had removed residential from that. I lost that vote 5-2. What I would encourage is for us not to go solve problems that don't exist. And that's what the Planning Commission said. And they said so not 5-4, they said so 6-2. Thank you.
One more comment. If we're expecting the board to always encourage residential use to be proffered out of a CS rezoning, why would we even allow by right CS rezoning? If we're just going to continuously request that to be proffered out, it makes sense to just not allow it, or allow it in a limited sense. It just doesn't make sense to me to just say, well, we'll deal with it in proffers, because at any time, the proffer process can change. People can just say, no, you can get a board that doesn't push for proffers. So, I mean, if we want to be consistent into the fact that we've always expected that proffers get rid of residential rezoning, why not just get rid of it out of the ordinance?
Mr. Chairman, in my mind, commercial services is an area that we have designated for businesses which will generate more tax revenue than they will expend by putting kids in school and requiring services. That makes sense to me. To dilute that and make it residential does not. Now, I believe that we could have a combination of commercial and residential. That seems to make sense. I've seen it, it looks good. I believe it probably works well from a financial perspective. And with that said, I'd like to move along and make a motion that we move this to public hearing and continue to look at this. And I would say move it to public hearing with a recommendation of 25% residential.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion, comments?
I'd just say that I haven't heard anybody, if he said it, I'm sorry I didn't hear it, but you could also do residential and commercial under a special use permit and come to the board and request the residential. Instead of having a 25% blanket, you rezone commercial, and if they wanted to put houses in there, they come back to the board and request a special use permit, and the board can decide at that time. It may be that it'll be in a position where you want more than 25% of it houses, or it may be that you don't want any, or maybe you want less. So, I mean, you've locked yourself in at the 25. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, we have the motion on the floor now is to move forward, so
Yep.
we'll vote on that motion, and if that doesn't pass, then you want to, or do you want to amend the
Well,
motion?
I'll support the motion because I think that, well, I don't know whether I want to support it or not, because of the fact that, if you did it under special use, the board has not got the option, once the public hearing's been held, it's been advertised for 25%, you don't have the option to go back and change it to a special use permit. If you advertise and hold a public hearing on residential allowed under a special use permit, if the board at that meeting decided that they wanted to allow 25%, they'd have that option to change that, because you're getting less restrictive than the advertisement would be. Am I correct on my comment?
I'm not sure about that, actually, Mr. Chairman. I think the text amendment would probably need to be advertised pretty specific to some degree, but we could advertise various options, you know, that could be considered.
Gotcha.
Instead of backing into a different perspective or case. And that's part of why we wanted to have this discussion this morning, so.
Sam, it was, the Planning Commission advertised the special use permit
That's
option,
correct.
correct?
Yes. And then they had us look at other options, but they decided to not recommend any of them, so.
Procedurally, can this motion, does this follow our procedures? Can we change what we're doing and then not have the Planning Commission have a hearing on it?
I think Mr. Underwood's probably correct there, that a zoning text amendment requires a Planning Commission hearing and a board hearing. And the commission's only had a hearing on a conditional use permit requirement.
They did. They had a public hearing specifically for that. We had a subsequent meeting that was not a public hearing to consider other options.
So I will amend my motion to say that we turn this back to the planning commission to review a 25% option. Does that cover where we should be?
To hold a public hearing
To
on
hold
the
a public hearing, yeah, yes,
25%
to hold a
option.
public hearing and consider that position. And Tom, I want to make one more comment here. Mr. Underwood, this helps us get to your 39-cent goal for taxes if we can do this.
I appreciate your opinion.
If you reach that goal, some of us are gonna be leaving. So they're not gonna be flexible.
You think lower taxes are going to make it more dense?
Yes.
I think we could have staff prepare a correlation of tax rate and density, and we would see that it's inversely correlated.
So we have an amended motion on the floor. Do I have a second? And the amended motion was to go back to the planning commission with a 25% ratio with residential
For a public hearing. Yes.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ms. Ellis, that's 5-2. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving on to new business. Item 5.01, the board will discuss and consider approval of the award of 2 separate contracts for the construction of a public pool at the Culpeper Sports Complex. And again, I'll turn this over to our county administrator for introduction.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, last month, Mr. Hardy brought forward a proposal for the pool project in which we had split it into 2 different contracts, one for the building and concrete and site work, and one for the actual pool itself. The board did authorize us to go ahead and prepare contracts for the 2 low bidders, and both of those contracts are ready for award today. And any questions or details needed, I would refer to Mr. Culpeper.
Thank you, John. Questions or comments for John? Or,
I have one question. Did we determine the contingency rate that we were going to go with for the cost estimate?
Alan, if you want to address that, I think the answer to that question is that basically there's no contingency built into the contracts. Is that right, Alan?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So we were discussing that the total project does not include any funds for contingency. Did we provide a recommendation on what that contingency should be so we know how much money we are
There's
planning on
no
putting up?
contingencies within the contract. It was an actual bid, which included the actual construction of the pool. This is the pool contract. And then with add alternate 1 and add alternate 2, and I believe that was a total price of 1.2 million, somewhere around that neighborhood. 121,000, yeah, 1,121,000. No contingencies.
Okay.
so that's not a not to exceed amount. In other words, if it's a change order, it goes up, but if we don't change anything, it stays at that amount, is that right?
That is correct, unless there's a need for a change order, and then, depending on the dollar value, it would, we could either implement it or come to the board for that change order request. I do not foresee any change orders at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you for all your work, and make a motion, we approve the contract.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Aye. And that's 5-2, Ms. Ellis. Thank you, Alan.
Oh,
And now was this for both of them, or is it, we doing the two separate contracts?
it was my understanding that was just for the pool. It's two separate contractors, two separate contracts.
Sports facility,
Okay, so now we'll move on to the
facility.
sports complex, the facility itself, the building.
Yes, sir. We did go out for bid also for the facility support building to support the pool. There was one bid, Taft Construction. I don't recall the price right now. I think it was around $3.4 million for that. Consecutive days for construction, 180 days for substantial completion of that project. And our recommendation to award to Taft Construction.
All I'd say is, once again, thanks to Chairman Deal for all his work on finding a way to get this creatively done and split so that we are back to close to what we were looking at the budget. So thank you very much.
Okay, motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve this one also.
All right, a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Aye.
All right.
5-2.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our committee reports. First will be our Public Works Committee, Supervisor Underwood.
Yes, sir. The committee brings forward a recommendation that the board authorize staff to move forward with plans to make improvements to the northernmost entrance and parking lot at the Carver Center. Additionally, the committee recommends that staff seek VDOT county safety and operational improvement funds for the southernmost entrance.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
All right, next, B, the committee brings forward a motion that the board authorize the advertisement of a public hearing to consider proposed additions to the Culpeper County water and sewer service areas. And I don't know if we need John to elaborate or not.
I can certainly do that. Kim, if you would please bring up the potential additions, the second attachment there. So the properties shown there in the yellow color are currently part of our water and sewer service area adopted by the board. The areas in red are requested additions, primarily right around the intersection of Ira Hoffman and 229 is an area designated in the comprehensive plan for mixed use. And we are considering or proposing that that area be added into the water and sewer service area, along with some other lots to just avoid having unnecessary donut holes. We also included the county-owned property at Catalpa at the recommendation of Mr. Howard, which makes sense. And there's one small parcel on 522 at the edge of town that actually already has some public services and would make sense to add. So those areas there, and then there was one additional area out by the airport. Kim, if you want to jump to the last map. Again, the water and sewer service area there encompasses the airport and the air park, and the parcel there highlighted in red is requested for addition to the service area as well. These would require a public hearing, so if the board is inclined to follow the Public Works Committee recommendation, it would be to authorize an advertisement for the July meeting.
Thank you, John.
Second the motion.
So we have a second, motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, Ms. Ellis.
Great. Next, last, and hopefully not least, the committee brings forward a motion to the board that staff be authorized to accept VDOT revenue sharing funds which are offered for improvements to the Riva Road and White Shop Road. Additionally, the board authorizes staff to proceed with an RFP for design and build services for the proposed improvements.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Questions? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to buildings and grounds, Supervisor Durr.
Mr. Chairman, the committee brings forward a motion that the Board of Supervisors authorize staff to move forward with the bid process for plans to expand the Emergency Operations Center.
And we want to elaborate on that, plans there? Okay.
Call to question, or do we need
Do
to?
we want any questions, or you want to? Okay, further discussion? Hearing none? Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Ellis. Next, we have our Economic Development Report. Brian Rothamel will give the Economic Development Report. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have a little bit longer presentation, so I promise that we'll be brief through it. Just want to give you a recap of our very busy May that we had. We'll go over goals 1.1, 1.3, 2.1, and 2.2. In this presentation, the Culpeper County Conference and the Business Appreciation Reception that we had on May 13th. For C3, we had 33 participants for the entire day. Instructors came from all over the Commonwealth, Blacksburg, Loudoun, Charlottesville, Madison, and Richmond. Our lunch panel that's where we have our Culpeper businesses talking to Culpeper business owners. We had Tabitha Fulton, Wade Chick, and Pep Trilio for a great lunch panel, and the small businesses utilized for the day. Breakfast, we purchased from Old Country Store and Raven's Nest for the coffee. Lunch was Delicious, and then speaker gifts, presentation gifts were from Green Roost and Raven's Nest. We had a great day. The business owners really left fired up and enjoyed. You can see classrooms filling up, so we're definitely seeing the growth of this conference that we're looking for. For CBAR, the Culpeper Business Appreciation Reception, first ever reception, we had 32 participants. It was a great night of networking, really worked the way we were hoping, that the business owners networked with each other, including us thanking them for being in business in Culpeper. We were able to announce our Lunch and Learn series that will be launching in FY 2025. That name we've now come up with, it's Facts and Snacks. So that way we don't always have to be at lunch. We could be at other times as well, but the idea is most of those will be occurring at lunch. SBDC will be providing the speakers for that. And small business utilized for CBAR was the Space and Food from Old Trade Brewery. We had the Culpeper Hiring Event and Resource Fair on May 16th at Germanna Community College. There were 61 candidates who were looking for positions or were coming for the resource providers, 28 employers, including the resource providers. 14 employers came from Culpeper County, and you can see the resource providers that were able to attend. Comment from Mr. Dalrymple from Chemung and Cedar Mountain Stone that they were hiring one person, and this really gives you these job fairs. You think everyone needs to hire 5, 10 people. For them, hiring one person is tremendously beneficial to their operation. So he was very thankful that they were able to hire one person there. Then for Be a Culpeper Local, we are a sponsor of Third Thursdays. They give us a booth to utilize at Third Thursdays. We are not always able to, it doesn't really work in our flow to utilize that space. So we've created a sign up where businesses on a first come, first served basis are able to ask to use the space that we have provided. The first one was Michaela Colgan of Little Cottage Florals. They do floral design. Her DIY bouquet bar sold out while she was there, so it was wonderful, and she received some great wedding inquiries and garden design. This is a great way for some of our county businesses to interact in the downtown area, and businesses can sign up with Winona Pritz, our business development coordinator, for that. And then a fun story, we've been doing our monthly business spotlights that have been featured in the local newspapers as well as on our website and our monthly email. First one was Banks Graphic Design. They were our March, which was our first time doing that. They had someone who was traveling through Culpeper, ended up having an emergency, went to the local, the hospital in the emergency room, happened to pick up the Star Exponent, happened to read about Banks Graphic Design, and they reached out. They ended up hiring her. So someone that started in networking. So this is Cody Banks just giving us that thank you, which I thought was just a fun story, that you don't know how these businesses' interactions will work, and we're glad to be able to amplify the good work that our business owners do. And small businesses can sign up for our monthly business spotlight, again, also on the Be a Culpeper local website. I think that's it.
Thank you, Brian. Questions for Brian?
I have one question, Brian. Thank you for the presentation. Do we already have other businesses that have signed up for the booth at the Thursday events?
We have one that's requested the space in June. We're waiting for approval from CRI's.
Okay.
So yes, CRA needs to approve, but so far we just have
gotcha.
June
Okay.
sign up. So July.
But we do expect July and August for those.
Yes, we're hopeful.
Yes, okay.
We're hopeful
I would
businesses
say
are.
it's a done deal.
Yeah, listening
Great.
now and able to sign up.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Ms. Pritz.
Just say, thank you, Brian. I appreciate the content creation that is helping local businesses, and I appreciate you using the resources in a way that are growing the community. So great job and thanks.
thank you.
All right, moving on. Item 8.0, our administrator's report. And with this, I'll turn it over to County Administrator for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to share a little bit of good news as my report this morning. I think most of you are aware that we've been working for literally years to have Greenhouse Road extended along the east side of the airport, which is a multi-pronged project. It alleviates a obstruction that the FAA considers Beverly Ford Road to be, as well as opens up the east side of the airport for future hangar and corporate type development. That project was a long time coming, primarily due to the price tag on it and the funding situation. We usually can get 90% of our projects paid for by the feds, 8% by the state, and the locality picks up 2%. In this case, the FAA had capped us at $3 million, which was not 90%, and the state stepped up and covered the shortfall, but they did so with the condition that future federal money coming in, which was set forth in legislation, so we knew it was coming, would be paid back to the state until their share had gotten back down to 8%. I crafted a letter to the Aviation Board with help from our airport manager. We met with our Aviation Board member, and ultimately the request was considered in Richmond a couple of weeks ago to do away with that payback requirement that was part of our grant, and that was approved. That saves us some $500,000 in future federal funds for the airport. So happy to report that.
Great news. Thank you, John. Comments?
Again, great news. That's good to hear.
All right, with that, we'll entertain a motion to move into closed session.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Virginia Code annotated section 2.2-3711A, 7, and 8, the board will receive legal advice and discuss potential litigation related to a public contract where consultation in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating/litigating posture of the board/county. 9.02, pursuant to Virginia Code annotated section 2.2-3711A 7, 8, and 29, the board will receive legal advice and consider investment of public funds related to real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating/litigating posture of the board/county.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're in closed session. Thank you all.